Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. Delighted today to be joined by Andreas Sjölund, who's co-founder and CRO for Quinix. We're going to be talking about engagement-driven workforce management and the importance of how a happy workforce makes a happy and profitable business. Hey, Andreas, how you doing?
Hi, Simon. I'm great. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Now, before we start, we'll talk football because there's some important things in life. And I think I've converted you to be a Leyton Orient fan.
Yeah, definitely. You did that. So you brought me to some good games, and I got the chance to play with the Stars as well. And I think that was the tipping point. So no, I'm a big Leyton Orient fan now. Thanks to you.
Good. And you're based in Boston, which ironically is where Nigel Travis, who's our chairman, one of the main investors in the club, lives. So I think you've had some good interactions with Nigel since your time there as well.
Yeah, so he's a great man, and I got the chance to meet him here in Wellesley outside Boston, where we both lives. And yeah, passionate football fan. I was about to say soccer fan since I'm here in the US now, but yeah, and I know he's meant a lot for Leyton Orient as well. So great meeting, and he has actually helped us a bit here with some introductions in the US as well to some interesting companies.
Good. It shows how small the world is, doesn't it? Business and football. Let's talk about workforce management. But before we dive into the detail, what's your background? How did you get to Quinix? What things did you do before?
Yeah, so I've been in the workforce management industry for about 17 years now. Stumbled into the workforce management area right after university. So I'm from Sweden, that you might see on my name and hear on my accent. But I moved over to the US and played hockey when I was 20 to 23. But then I wasn't good enough in hockey, so I went back to Sweden and started studying in the University of Uppsala, and I did 1 year in Norway as well. But after those studies, I started with a company called Brave Time, which was focusing on workforce management in the Nordics, and sold to companies like H&M and Co-op and Schenker over there. Yeah, and then I met Eric. We started, or he started Quinix, and I joined him really early and started helping selling the solution. Grew the business from Sweden into the other Nordic countries. Did about 4 years in the UK, and last year I moved over here to the US to keep growing the Quinix business and creating more happy employees and a happier workforce. So that's short background.
The story that you kind of mentioned briefly about Eric founding Quinix is always quite interesting to listen to. So if you can give us kind of the short version of how all that came to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. So Eric, who is definitely the brains and the man behind the solution Quinix, he was actually working a sunny day at McDonald's, in Sweden, in the middle of Sweden, and he did that during his high school summer holiday. After he worked there for about a week and he was flipping burgers, he saw that in the back there was his manager just sweating, stressing about getting people calling in wanting to swap shifts. He was stressed to get people in to come to work to sell the burgers and make the burgers. So he actually got an idea as he was standing there flipping burgers that it must be a better way to solve this. So he literally went home to his boy room and built the first version of Quinix that back then was called McTime. What the solution did was basically show the schedule for the employees so they can go in and book the shifts. They could see how much they were going to make if they took a shift, and the scheduler or the restaurant manager could get an overview of the schedule and make sure to get people in, and saved a lot of time and effort and stress and also money on that scheduling solution. So that started with one franchise in the middle of Sweden, and then Eric managed to sell it into the whole McDonald's organization in Sweden, and then to Denmark, and then also over to the UK. So that's how the company started, just from a problem to be solved by a 17-year-old, very intelligent young man who is still the CEO of our company and a great leader and amazing to work with. So that's how it all started. But then from that, we grew into a larger business, and now we're over 220 employees, and we have offices in about 8 countries around the world.
Amazing. And you've got kind of a big company purpose, ethos, culture, however you want to describe it, around engagement. So I know you do a lot of work internally with your teams. How does that engagement and the drive to engage people in the solution, user friendliness, how does that all fit into kind of your customers and why potentially they choose your solution?
Yeah, so we grew from McDonald's to also serve other markets, so like healthcare and warehouse logistics and retail, but mainly blue collar workers. And we see that blue collar workers, they have been a bit left behind when it comes to software. We see that, it's the majority of the working people in the world, and we really want to serve both the businesses that have a lot of blue collar workers and also the employees themselves. So we invest a lot in our mobile app, which is, the communication and engagement platform between the business and the employee. So we have a solid scheduling system where you can optimize the schedule based on footfall and traffic and sales or patients or orders to fill. So we do all that stuff with optimization for the business. But we really believe that it also needs to be optimized for the end worker and the blue collar worker, so that they have flexibility. They don't want to miss any birthdays or important events. And thanks to our technology, they can swap shifts, they can book vacant shifts, they can communicate better, and they can also have a much more flexibility in the work-life balance. And having those two married together, that's why we talk about the happy workforce, happy business. We really think that's really tied together. And it comes from the start of our company, where the company was built by an employee at a McDonald's restaurant. So that's something that is close to our heart and something that we now have invested a lot into to build a great solution for that.
Where do you see that kind of stuff going? So what demands are colleagues going to make in a world that potentially, if we think about retail and hospitality, we've got less people employed in that industry, maybe getting paid more or being expected to do more. What demands do you think they'll be making on their employers from a technology point of view and an engagement and a way of working?
Yeah, good question. So we see that the blue collar workers will be even more important, in the economy and in the world we are now, post COVID-19 or during this pandemic. So one thing is, the communication piece, where it's so important to not only communicate one way from, head office to the employee, but also vice versa. So we see that, just in March when COVID, broke out, our Q mails that we have, which is the internal communication system, grew 50%. We saw that go up, but we also saw the amount of schedules go down a bit. Being able to have a tool to communicate between each other, connected to the schedule was something that was really, really thought after. So both that, but also the possibility to get a sense of how the employees are doing. So with the social media and what you have today, it's a new way of communicating as well. So we have the possibility to send out pulse surveys so that the employees can answer questions like, how are you doing today? How do you cope with, the stress of COVID-19, just to get that sense check back to the HR or to the head office so that they know, because if you don't have a tool like that, it's impossible to pick this up and to know what actions to take to drive the business forward. So I think the technology and the blue collar workers, that they are engaged and that they know what to do and that the communication works it's already key right now, and it's going to be even more important in the future.
That whole communication to blue collar workers, frontline workers, however you want to describe them, was really interesting during the start of the pandemic, because I think lots of organizations suddenly realized they probably knew that it was difficult to communicate to frontline workers, and they did it through email or via pay slips or whatever. But that instant comms of pushing out a pulse survey or pushing out some comms to say, actually, this store's in lockdown, this store's now open. I think the penny dropped for quite a few retailers that instant comms, they just didn't have the ability to do. So that must have been a big benefit in terms of people being able to use Qmail to instantly get very, very mission critical business messages out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have a good example of that, which is a big pizza chain that they wanted, or with the pandemic, you had to touchless pizza. So you didn't make sure that, from the pizza was made to the delivery to the customer, that the pizza wasn't touched. So they needed to get out that every restaurant needed to put a sticker on the pizza box that had that message. But they realized that they didn't have any good message to get that out to everybody. They could get out to the stores or to the restaurants, but not to the end employee. They actually contacted us because we offered our communication for free, and we still do if customers are interested in that, to use it with no strings attached, just to help through the pandemic. And they really saw that benefit and contacted us and realized that, we need a way to reach our employees in a much faster and quicker and safer way than we do today. So yeah, that definitely was something that came up during this tough time.
What correlation do you see between kind of happy workforce and happy business? Do your customers talk to you about they, see an uplift in sales or retention or less turnover? Are there any high-level stats you can share with us around what people see, if they're getting more variety in their schedules or the days off that they want?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done surveys in all our markets where we're in. Every market says the same message. So the importance of having a flexible schedule, 25% in general says that that's more important than even pay. So it's more important for them to have a flexible schedule than to get more paid. And that's something that I think has changed during the last, 5-10 years, from pay being definitely the most important part. So we see that change. It's going to be even more important in the future, the way the world works and the way that we consume media and the way we live our lives. It's not you have your vacation once per year and then you work the rest. It's much more flexibility now with things going on. And we really need technology that can help support that, because it really pays off in the end when you have more engaged employees. You have employees that also can make more money if they want to. And so it's really in line with kind of the gig economy and where that is going. And we help customers have a gig economy within the company, so to say.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of stats out there, isn't there, that money, although it ranks first, second, third in any what's important for wherever I work, is a short-term motivator. So you can give somebody a pay rise, clearly they appreciate it, but actually within 3 months, I think the stats are, it's pretty much forgotten. And if they were feeling not happy with the company for a number of reasons, those feelings start to come back because that money's only a really short-term motivator.
Yeah.
As you said, worked in Sweden, worked in the UK, started to work in the US last year in Boston and wider. What differences are there, or are there any differences in terms of how people do the business over there? Is it more engagement driven in America, or is it more engagement driven in Europe? Is it the same? Do you see any big differences or any big similarities?
Yeah, no, I think that it has changed during the years. So in Sweden, usually they're very flat organizations, and there are, not so much hierarchy in the organizations there. And I think going from Sweden to the UK, I think that was one change, that it was more hierarchies in the UK compared to Sweden. In Sweden, though, you have the consensus, so you need everybody to agree to a decision, and it's not like a boss that takes a decision. But I think that, going to the UK in the beginning, it was, at least maybe because I was used to Sweden, but in the beginning it was more hierarchic. But if you take one deal we won with Debenhams, where they actually took in their store managers, and they had the store managers, using the app and using the system before they took a decision. That was a big reason for them to choose Quinyx, because they let the end users really use the software. So I think that is actually going more to that. Also, big companies understands that they really need to have the employees also part of a bigger decision, like buying a workforce management system. The differences wasn't as big as I thought they were going to be. The deals took a little bit longer, maybe a bit to the hierarchy and who was going to sign the deal and things like that in the UK. But we figured it out after a couple of months how things work. But then and there's also a lot of good things between the UK and Sweden, a lot of similarities that works well. Going over to the US here, what the big difference here is, I think in the UK we could travel, at least before the COVID-19, we traveled and met pretty much all our customers. And based on the geography here in the US, it's not just, it's time-wise and also it's not efficient basically. So a lot of more business is done even before COVID online and over Zoom or Teams or the solution you use for that. So I think coming to the US, we built an amazing team here with a hub in Boston, which I still think was a good thing to get the culture and to get the knowledge of our solution over. But now as we continue to grow, we also hire people in other states, to cover the size of the US. And now even more, you can do business over the phone or over the computer. And I think that's been more common here in the US for a longer time. So there's definitely some changes, but also some similarities, I would say.
And in terms of kind of the colleague culture, the blue collar worker culture in America versus Europe, I think contractually it's very different, isn't it? Because there's no concept, if my understanding is right, of kind of a contract in America. It's the legalities of promised work are a lot different. How does that, or what feedback have you had from kind of when you've got to the frontline colleagues in America versus, let's say, the UK, where it seems a lot more rigid in terms of if I'm contracted for 30 hours a week, whether I work them or not, as in, if you don't give me 30 hours, you still have to pay me 30 hours, seems very different.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And that is definitely different here in the US. So they don't, the employees doesn't have the same rights as they do in Europe, so to say. So you could have, it's very common that you have open agreements where it doesn't say how much you're obliged to work. So it's more flexibility from the company side to tell the employee when they should work and not being committed to any hours. But what we actually see is that it's going in a more European direction, actually. So there's examples of, huge companies like Walmart that goes to see how they can force a 6-week working pattern so that the employees get 6 weeks where they know how they're going to work in the future. And that hasn't been the case before. They see it maybe 1 week or a couple of days before they get the schedule. But that's actually an institute here at the MIT called the Good Work Institute, where Walmart has worked closely with them to where they done studies on what makes an employee productive. Because if you have that stress, and you also need to have maybe 3, 4, 5 different jobs to be able to, since you don't know how many hours you're going to get from one company, they see that you get the trained people to working, they're more productive and they don't have that financial stress that you might have when you're not knowing. So they have implemented that in some of their stores and are working on that. And we see other trends with other companies as well, where they see that. And there's also regulations like predictive scheduling, where if you change a schedule 5 days or 7 days before you should work, the employee gets more pay. So that's coming from California and Oregon and some of these states. So there's definitely a big change today if you compare the US to Europe with the rights that employees have. But they're taking strides in the right direction, I would say, here in the US as well, to give the blue collar worker and the frontline worker more flexibility, but also more certainty in their working hours.
It's interesting because kind of the UK is shifting more towards the American model of that gig economy, more flexibility, probably less contract hours, the ability to bring people in and flex up. Whereas, like you say, America's almost moving the other way. So it'd be interesting if they almost meet in the middle and there becomes a spectrum of what the optimum contracted hours per week is, and then everything else around it's flexibility. So it'll be interesting to see over, I suppose, the next 12 to 18 months if they meet in the middle or almost they're going in opposite directions, ironically.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think we have data now that is quite interesting that we started to look into, since we have so many companies and employees in our database, to see these trends and to see where is that match where, in contracted hours versus fixed time employees, and also with the service now to be able to get the employees feedback. And what we're also looking into adding is also the customer feedback for retail and hospitality, for example. So this like a 360, how many people do you need to give good service, so you don't underschedule your store or restaurant and they give bad service, and then the employees are leaving as well because they're not happy. So there's a lot of interesting data points here that we can help with in our solution as well.
And I know it's been a really strange time for the world. Have you seen any trends in terms of companies investing more in tech during the pandemic, or have you seen companies not investing in tech? We've seen lots of different examples both ways, but from a workforce management point of view, has it been people investing, or has it been people kind of sitting on the fence to wait to see what happens?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been an interesting time, and it's what we've seen with our different offices is that it's been very, very different as well. So you have Sweden, which has their own way of handling the COVID-19, where they continue to keep the schools open and most of the businesses open. There was a dip in the beginning that there was some companies that went bankruptcy, but if you compare that to the UK or the US, the business has kept going, and a lot of companies has continued investing in technology, like big postal offices that we won, and warehouse logistics companies, where they see the need even more now to invest. And we also have some customers that, like Livy or Cree.se, which is digital healthcare, that just went through the roof and needed more functionality and more licenses. So if you compare Sweden, which is a very special example, that has not been as impacted as other countries. But you also have the different verticals that you mentioned, hospitality and retail, where hotels obviously has had a really tough time, where we had some great discussions before COVID-19, but that they were paused during the pandemic, and now we're starting to pick up the discussion again, but it's probably going to take some time before things happen there. And then you also have retail, where some retailers has done really well. So we have a bike chain that has really grown as well. And then you have other types of retail, like more luxury retail and that type of companies that has had a tough time, but are starting to come back now. So we definitely see now, in August, September now, things are picking up. RFPs are starting to come out with a lot of focus on what we talked on the podcast today about, with both optimization, but also the engagement piece. We see the engagement and communication in almost every RFP now, because they have really seen first page, how important that is. So it's not back to normal. I don't think it will probably never, be as before COVID, but it's definitely starting to open up now in all our markets.
Slightly off topic, but you mentioned there kind of back home Sweden weren't as acutely affected by the pandemic, and I know they did lockdown quite differently almost to the rest of the world, in terms of it wasn't really a lockdown. What have people back home been telling you about how all that worked?
Yeah, no, it's been very interesting to follow. And I actually joined a webinar with the Swedish Chamber of Commerce in the US that invited Anders Tegnell, who is this pandemic specialist and the guy behind the strategy of Sweden, because a lot of Swedes abroad get the questions like, why are you handling the COVID-19 like this? And it was really interesting because he I think he's a smart man. You can discuss if it's been right or wrong, but he said, all the countries have the same strategy. Sweden is a bit different because of the public healthcare system that has a lot of resources. They Sweden is also very big, so they're very spread out. It's just a different cultural set, that if the government tells you something, they usually listen and do it, which also made their strategy a bit different. So they kept the schools open, they kept the businesses open as much as they could, because they saw that if they closed down the schools, it would be more problems, social problems at home with families and things like that. And it was quite of a different approach. He said he can't compare Sweden to any other countries because of the people and the density of people and the culture and things like that. So he was very humble. He didn't say, he did right or wrong, but he was interested in listening into. And he said as well, and that nobody knows what's the right approach. We will see, probably years to come, but it has been different, and it has been a bit controversial the way they handle it, for sure.
Yeah, I think only time will tell, but I think it's also good to have a different way of doing it and a different way of thinking about it, because otherwise you've got no benchmark or no comparator if everybody followed the same stance. So as in all this stuff, time will tell, but as we speak currently, it looks like they've navigated it quite well. So hats off. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting there also with the face mask. I know that's a big discussion point, and almost over here in the US it's a political almost discussion as well. But the reason, which was interesting, that in Sweden they don't force face masks, and the reason for that is that Anders thinks that it will create a false kind of protection, because you're not invisible, or you can still get other people sick if you wear a mask. So he's afraid that if you have a mask, that you will go out even though you're sick, and then you will get more people sick. So that's just an interesting other way of looking at it with input. But over here in the US, you need to have a mask when you go outside and when you go meet people, which creates, I think, a bit of protection as well. But it's also, of course, very cumbersome in some cases. Yeah, but very different approach. And I spoke to a Swedish colleague this morning, and she said that it's basically back to the same. The restaurants are full, nobody has masks, and in Sweden, and it's different, but there's actually the amount of people in the sick beds is going down. So we will see, but of course we need to stay safe and healthy and do what we can to get the virus away.
So listen, it's been fantastic to catch up. I always enjoy having a chat with you, and we've known each other for a while, so it's good to stay in touch. So final question from me then, what's the best bit of business advice you've ever been given?
Oh, good question. Well, I think the best business advice is probably from my dad, actually. So if something happens to you, you should think, how can you turn this around to something even better than if it hasn't happened? So I think that's probably something in life and business, I think, and especially with COVID-19, like no matter what life throws at you, like how can you have that mentality to really take something positive and think about it like, okay, now this is reality. How can I make it even more positive than if it didn't happen? So getting a little emotional here, but that's the best advice, I would say.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I think our dads passed away within a couple of months of each other, didn't they? A kind of earlier part of this year. So good advice from him. And I fully support that. If you can make a positive out of anything negative, then life's only going to be better, isn't it? So wise words from a wise man, I'm sure.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that.
If anybody listening wants to get in touch with you or the team, Andreas, where's the best place to make contact? Yeah,
so I'm on LinkedIn. So you can look for Andreas Sjölund, SJOLUND, a bit strange Swedish name. Or you can send me an email as well, andreas.sjölund@quinyx.com. We'd love to hear your feedback, and if there's anything I can help with, I'm more than happy to help. So really great speaking to you, Simon, and appreciate this time.
No problem. Take care. Thanks, Andreas.
Thank you, Simon. Cheers.